Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Zechariah chapter 14. This is the last chapter of this book, which will take us into the last book of the New Testament, and also our complete journey through the entire New Testament. More on that later, though. We have been taking a slow crawl through Zechariah because of the vivid picture we have of the second coming of Jesus. And so this is an astounding. As I said, when you study prophecy, prophecy is not hard to understand, as with all things Bible. Anything in the Bible is not hard to understand. God wrote the Bible so that we could literally read it and understand it so that we can do it. When it comes to prophecy, there is a lot of prophecy, and you get different pictures, you get different details. So like in this prophecy, we're getting the details of when Jesus actually comes. His feet touches on the Mount of Olives. In Revelation chapter 19, we see Jesus come in the clouds. Every eye will see him. And then we see him deal with the beasts and their armies. We also see him here in Zechariah, where he gathers the armies to war against Israel. Israel will go through a very rough time because of their sins. But you see at the end, God will come, Jesus will come, and then will destroy the armies, the wicked armies of the world who set out to fight against Israel, ultimately fight against the Lord. So we saw in this chapter how vivid the details were, that with this great slaughter, you would have just millions upon millions of dead bodies all over the land. They will employ full-time grave diggers, people who will go out and scout over this period of time, because they would have been also ravaged by the birds and the wild animals. God said, I'm going to gather all of the birds and stuff for this great sacrificial supper that I'm going to provide for you. So by the time that the grave diggers and the scouts get to them, they will see only bones. They're going to put a marker there. And it's going to take them 7 months to cleanse the land by burying the bones. 7 months. Just kind of an astounding detail. And then we see, and then what we're going to get into here is, let me pull up the verse. Excuse me. Okay. So we see verse 12. Let me go back to verse 1. Now he says, a day of the Lord is coming when your plunder will be divided in your presence. I will gather all nations against Jerusalem for battle. So we've been seeing this great battle. But we know now that will be the beast and the armies of the beast, the armies of the world who have given authority to the beast, the 10 nations, 10 nations, but they will wage war against the beast, against Jesus. He says the city will be captured, the houses looted, and the women raped. Half the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be removed from the city. Now, this part is hard because, again, you see a more hard times coming for Israel. And why? Because of their disobedience. Okay? And then verse 3 says, then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fights on the day of battle. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. The Mount of Olives will be split in half from the east to the west, forming a huge valley, so that half of the mountain will move to the north and half to the south, and then you will flee by the mountain valley. For the valley mountains will extend to Azel, and you will flee as you fled from the earthquake in the day of Uzziah the king. Then the Lord my God will come, and all of his holy ones with him. And let me quickly go over to, I'm going to go, this is Ezekiel. No, this is Revelations, okay? And we read that, but I want to read Matthew 24 again. We read Matthew 24 many times, but let's get this side by side with this one here, with this passage. So at verse 15, he says, "So when you see the abomination that caused this desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. A man on his housetop must not come down to get things out of his house. A man in the field must not go back to get his clothes. Woe to the pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. Pray that your escape may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, for at that time there will be great tribulation, the kind that hasn't taken place from the beginning of the world until now and never will again. Unless those days were limited, no one would survive, but those days will be limited because of the elect." Look at verse 29. "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the celestial powers will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the peoples of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And notice this, he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet. They will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other." Now, so I just wanted again to show you side by side how prophecy, the continuity of prophecy. So then he goes and it gives us a little snapshot in verse 8. "On that day, waters will flow from Jerusalem." Remember, we talked about the glory of that kingdom. We're going to get another picture as well. Verse 12 says, "This will be the plague the Lord strikes all the peoples with who have warred against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they stand on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. On that day, a great panic from the Lord will be among them." So we saw all of that, right? We studied that. This great supper, the birds and all of that, right? The fact that they apply, again, grave diggers for 7 months who will be buried or be burying all of these dead carcasses. Actually, they won't be carcasses, they'll just be bones by the time they get to them, because the birds of the sky will have picked them clean, as they say. So I'm gonna. So then, let me read from verse 12 and go on. "This will be the other plague the Lord strikes all nations with, who have warred against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they stand on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. On that day, a great panic from the Lord will be among them, so that each will seize the hand of another, and the hand of one will rise against another. Judah will also fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations will be collected: gold, silver, clothing in a great abundance. And the same plague as the previous one will strike the horses, mules, camels, donkeys, and all the animals that are in those camps." Now look at verse 16. "Then all the survivors from the nations that came against Jerusalem will go up." Now notice he says survivors. Now these would be the people then that after Jesus comes, and then that great conflict the great slaughter, then the people, notice he said, that survive. So then these people will live during the millennial reign. Okay, and let me say this. I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to come back and kind of like I talked about this earlier, but I want to again talk about it. But notice he said, then all of the survivors from the nations that came against Jerusalem. So there will be survivors. Now think about that. There will be survivors. And one of the reasons why there's going to be survivors is that, remember, Jesus, this 1,000-year reign, you could say that Jesus is coming back and he's going to reign under the present conditions, the physical conditions. In other words, there's coming a time when there will be a new heavens and earth. Okay, so a new heavens and earth. And but the 1,000 years that Jesus will reign, Satan is going to be bound for 1,000 years. So you will not have the inciting of into sin and all of the evils we see in the world today that's caused by Satan. Jesus will be reigning. Life will be tremendously better. We read last. Remember, we said that uh, the the lion will not be carnivorous. It won't be feeding on other animals, but eating straw and ox. A child, a little baby, an infant, will be able to play with snakes. Okay? But also, we should keep remembering that there is a verse where he says that he will rule the earth with a iron scepter. Okay? That he will rule the earth with an iron scepter. Now watch this. We're going to see this picture here. Do I have that in there? Let me quickly find one verse that says that. There are a few verses that say that, but let me Revelations. I believe I can find it in 12. Here we go. Here we go, right here. All right, so, um, but she gave birth to a son, a male who was going to shepherd all nations with an iron scepter. I just wanted you to read that. It's going to shepherd all nations with an iron scepter. So then watch this. Verse 16 says, then all the survivors from the nations that come up against Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to celebrate the festival of booths. Should any of the families of the earth not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, rain will not fall on them. And if the people of Egypt will not go up and enter, their rain will not fall on them. This will be the plague the Lord inflicts on the nations who do not go up to celebrate the festival of booths. This will be the punishment of Egypt and all the nations that do not go up and celebrate the festival of booths. Now, this is kind of interesting. During the millennial reign, what exactly is going on here? So the festival of booths was a celebration under the law where people went up and they kind of lived in booths, these little makeshift booths. And I think it was the time of harvest that they celebrated this. It came around the time of harvest. So now it's kind of interesting that this is a prophecy that's going to happen during the millennial reign. Um, but anyway, he says that then if the nations do not come up, so Jerusalem is going to be very crowded during this time. But notice he said that if the nations don't come up, they won't receive rain. So this is this kind of image of the sternness that Jesus will rule with. It still would be good, but also too, think about this, that he's ruling with an iron scepter. this is not a time where it's not a time where impurity, sin is completely moved. The only thing that's removed during this time is Satan, who is the agent that incites sin. In other words, there are people that will still have sin nature. There are people who will be incited to sin, in which, let's see if I can quickly show this. This is chapter 20. So then, look at this one. This is verse 7 says, when the 1,000 years are completed, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out and deceive the nations at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. So again, this is during the 1,000-year reign of Jesus, at the end of it. And he says, to gather them for battle, their number is like the sand of the sea. They came up over the surface of the earth and surrounded the encampment of the saints, the beloved city, which is Jerusalem. Then fire came down from heaven and consumed them. The devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire, and so forth. The beast and false prophet are. Remember, they had been thrown in 1,000 years earlier, and then they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. So that is kind of the end of wickedness. You get into the great white throne judgment, and then what's called the new heavens and the new earth. All right. So then, verse 20 says, on that day, the word holy to the Lord will be on the bales of horses. The pots in the house of the Lord will be like the sprinkling basins before the altar. Every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah will be holy to the Lord of hosts. And everyone who sacrifices will come and take some of the pots to cook in. And on that day, there will no longer be a Canaanite in the house of the Lord. Now, that's kind of interesting. The Canaanites were cursed by God way back during Noah's son. If you go back and when Ham, who looked at his father's nakedness, and whatever that means, okay, when Noah woke up, he cursed his seed, Canaan. He said, and it actually was kind of a prophecy that he cursed one of the descendants, the line descendants, which is Canaan. And so throughout, Canaanites have been always branded as evil, and they were. And throughout history, their history has been one of just evil people. And so it's kind of amazing here that out of all the people, he says, there will no longer be a Canaanite in the house of the Lord. That's very interesting. Now, I remember there was another verse of scripture I read where it says that Satan, not a serpent, will eat dust. Out of all the people, the only one that serpent won't be changed. That's interesting. But again, let me just say this. A lot of this stuff, we probably won't have full understanding until that day. Like, I'm not understanding where the sacrifices are going to come in at during the 1,000-year reign. I can't answer that. I don't know. We see that it is stated here about the sacrifices, but that's going to be, again, something during the millennial reign, okay, the 1,000-year reign. And so with that, like, wow, right? There's a lot of things about the millennial reign that, again, we're just going to have to wait until we see. Like, for example, the sons of God during this period of time, okay? The sons of God. Think about that. So there's a lot of things, again, there's a lot of things that is yet to be uncovered and unmasked. But okay, guys, that is the book of Zechariah. And our next study would be Malachi, which would be the last book of the Old Testament and the last book of our complete journey of verse by verse, chapter by chapter, and book by book study through the entire Bible. But I'll see you in the next study. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I'll see you in the next study.